There is a photograph of John Edward Robinson that circulated widely after his arrest. In it, he looks exactly like what he wanted you to see, a heavy-set, grandfatherly man with glasses, a soft face, and the kind of unremarkable Midwestern bearing that makes him invisible in a crowd. He looks like someone's church elder, someone who coaches Little League, someone who waves from the driveway on Sunday morning and knows everybody's name on the block. He killed at least 8 women across 16 years. He stored their bodies in chemical drums. He cashed their benefit checks months after they were dead. He sold one woman's 4-month-old baby to his own brother. And when the internet arrived, he found a hunting ground so vast, so anonymous, so perfectly constructed for a man of his particular pathology that investigators would later call him something that had never been said before about anyone. The internet's first serial killer. This is the architecture of what he built. And this is how it came apart.
Welcome to Constructing the Crime, where every mystery has a blueprint.
John Edward Robinson was born on December 27, 1943, in Cicero, Illinois, the third of 5 children in a working-class Catholic household. His father worked as a machinist. His mother kept the house in order with strict discipline. And young John, by almost every external measure, seemed destined for something impressive. He was a confident and charming boy, an Eagle Scout, a choir boy, a teenager who sang for Queen Elizabeth II during a performance tour of London at 17 and came home with the kind of story that made him the most interesting person in any room he entered. He was also, from very early on, a liar. Not the kind of liar who embellishes to seem interesting or omits to avoid embarrassment. A systematic one. A liar whose fabrications were elaborate and purposeful and designed to construct a version of himself that bore only passing resemblance to reality. The gap between the performance and the person was the constant in John Robinson's life. Everything he would do for the next 50 years was built on that gap. He married young. He had 4 children. He moved through a string of jobs: medical administrator, insurance salesman, lab technician, leaving behind a trail of fraud charges, forged documents, and stolen money that should have been impossible to overlook. He was imprisoned for fraud more than once. He was convicted. He served time. He came back out and resumed the same performance, the same suits, the same handshake, the same community board memberships. By the mid-1980s, John Edward Robinson had something more dangerous than charm. He had a method he had figured out through trial and error, refined over decades, that the most reliable way to get away with anything is to operate in the space between institutions. He set up shell companies with official-sounding names. He created letterheads. He produced business cards. He moved his operations across county and state lines so that no single jurisdiction ever had a complete picture of what he was doing. He targeted people who were invisible to the systems that might have protected them. The young, the broke, the desperate, the alone. And when those people disappeared, he produced letters in their handwriting, signed in advance, on blank stationery he had obtained from them on some pretext, explaining that they had moved on, that they were fine, that they didn't want to be found. It worked. For 16 years, it worked. The first name on the record is Paula Godfrey. In 1984, Robinson set up more fraudulent shell companies and hired 19-year-old Paula Godfrey as a sales representative for his management consulting firm, Equi II. Godfrey, eager to start a business career, told her family that Robinson had arranged for her and other women to fly to San Antonio, Texas, for a clerical skills course. Robinson picked her up on September 1st, 1984, to drive her to the airport, and she was never heard from again. Her parents filed a missing persons report. Police questioned Robinson, who denied knowing where she was. Several days later, her parents received a typewritten letter with Godfrey's signature at the bottom, thanking Robinson for his help and asserting that she was fine and did not want to see her family. The investigation was terminated, as Godfrey was of legal age and there was no evidence of wrongdoing. No trace of Paula Godfrey has ever been found. Robinson exploited the benefit of the doubt afforded to a white male business owner. The signed letter was enough. The shell company letterhead was enough. The confident, articulate man who answered investigators' questions without flinching was enough. This is the architecture of the first disappearance. A woman who trusted a man who looked like an employer, a signature obtained in advance on blank paper, a letter produced on cue, and a system that lacked either the tools or the will to look harder. 3 months later, Robinson constructed something new. Around Christmas 1984, Robinson invented a new organization, the Kansas City Outreach Program, ostensibly dedicated to helping women in difficult circumstances find employment and stability. It did not exist in any functional sense. It had no staff, no funding, no office, no program. What it had was Robinson presenting himself as a philanthropist and social entrepreneur, and the power of a letterhead and a business card to convey legitimacy to people who had no reason to be suspicious of a well-dressed man offering help. In January 1985, Robinson encountered Lisa Stasi through this fiction. Lisa Stasi was 19 years old, recently separated from her husband, living with her 4-month-old daughter Tiffany at a battered women's shelter in Kansas City. She was young, alone, broke, and vulnerable in precisely the ways Robinson had learned to identify and exploit. He used a different name with her. Using the alias John Osborne, Robinson met Lisa at Hope House, a shelter for homeless women. He promised her a job in Chicago, an apartment, and daycare for her baby, and asked her to sign several sheets of blank stationery. She signed them. Of course she signed them. She was 19 years old, she had a 4-month-old baby, and a man with a business card and a warm handshake was offering her a way out. The next day, Stasi's family got a phone call in which a terrified-sounding Stasi said they had deemed her an unfit mother and that her mother Betty had said she wanted the baby. The last her family heard from Lisa were the words, "Here they come," over the phone before it was disconnected. No one saw or had any contact with. The baby was renamed Heather. She would grow up knowing Robinson as her uncle. She would spend holidays with him. She would feel, in a way she could never quite articulate, that something about him was wrong. It would take 15 years for her to find out how right she was. Lisa Stasi's body has never been found. Between 1985 and 1993, Robinson continued. Catherine Clampett, a 27-year-old from Texas, disappeared after moving to Kansas for a job offer from Robinson. Her body has also never been found. He went to prison in 1987 on a theft conviction. He served his time. He came out. While incarcerated, he met Beverly Bonner, the prison librarian. After Robinson was released, Bonner left her husband to be with him, even though they was still married. She was never heard from again. Robinson continued to collect her alimony checks for months. He had her send letters to her family before she disappeared, letters written in advance, letters she had no idea she was writing as a goodbye. Sheila Faith and her disabled 15-year-old daughter Debbie moved to Kansas after being promised housing and care. Both vanished. Robinson collected Debbie's disability checks, a girl in a wheelchair, dead in a barrel, still generating paperwork, still a line item in the administrative life of John Edward Robinson. This is the part that is hardest to absorb, not just that he killed these women, but the cold, bureaucratic efficiency with which he managed the aftermath. The bodies went into 55-gallon chemical drums, sealed and stored. The checks kept arriving. He kept cashing them. He kept responding to any inquiry with letters in their handwriting, phone calls arranged in advance, explanations that covered every exit. He was running a system. The women were, in his accounting of things, like an inventory. In 1993, Robinson discovered the internet. To understand what this meant, you have to understand what the internet was in the early 1990s. Most Americans had never heard of it. Broadband did not exist. Connections were dial-up, slow, shrieking, and in the obscure corners of this early network, in bulletin boards and chat rooms accessible only to those who knew where to look, there were communities of people exploring interests they could not explore in public life. Fetish communities, alternative lifestyle communities, people with desires that mainstream culture had no space for, seeking connection with others who understood them. Robinson spoke to women in online chat rooms under a carefully chosen alias. Authorities determined that several of his victims had been in private, consensual adult relationships with Robinson, relationships he ultimately exploited and weaponized before taking their lives. The architecture of the scam evolved, but its structure was identical to everything he had done before. The women he targeted were not foolish. They were adults making considered choices about their own lives. What Robinson offered was not simply desire. He offered desire packaged inside the appearance of stability, a dominant man with financial resources, a sophisticated arrangement, a position as a live-in companion, with salary, with travel, with the formalized structure of a written contract that made the whole thing feel legitimate and considered. He lured multiple women by offering them special contracts or agreements to become his full-time submissive. He understood these communities. He understood their language, their hierarchies, their trust systems. He understood that someone presenting himself as an experienced, financially secure dominant was offering exactly what a certain kind of person was looking for. He weaponized that understanding with surgical precision. Isabella Luica was 21 years old when she disappeared in 1999. Robinson had paid for her apartment, her bills, given her a job. He continued to use her identity online, sending emails to her family to cover his tracks. Her family received correspondence. They believed she was alive and simply engaged in a relationship she had chosen not to discuss with them. Her body was in a barrel on Robinson's farm in La Cygne, Kansas. Suzette Troutin was 27 years old from Michigan when she met Robinson online in 1999. She was a nurse's aide who cared for elderly patients, and Robinson offered her what appeared to be a dream opportunity, a position as a live-in carer for his elderly father, with extensive travel, a generous salary, and the additional arrangement of a dominant submissive relationship. If only she knew his elderly father had been dead for 10 years. Robinson told Troutin she'd need to board her dogs and sign dozens of blank sheets of paper and pre-addressed envelopes before leaving. She moved to Kansas in February 2000. She was the last person he killed. She was also the thread that would finally unravel him. Suzette Troutin had people who loved her and who did not accept her disappearance quietly. Her family began making inquiries. They received emails, cheerful, slightly odd emails, talking about travel and adventure. Those emails had been written in advance, of course, signed on the blank stationery Troutin had handed over before she left, but her family pushed. They contacted investigators, and when investigators looked at Troutin's case, they found that another woman, Isabella Luica, had also vanished after contact with the same man. Meanwhile, in the spring of 2000, 2 other women came forward. 2 women filed police reports alleging that Robinson had gone beyond the boundaries of consensual activity during their interactions, giving up his internet persona. One of the women, Vicky Neufeld, also claimed Robinson had refused to return personal items worth $700 that belonged to her. That complaint gave investigators the probable cause they needed. He was arrested on June 2, 2000, and police obtained search warrants, a theft charge, a $700 dispute over property Robinson had taken from a woman and refused to return. This is what cracked it open. It sounds almost absurd, set against the scale of what investigators were about to find. But this is how complex criminal architecture tends to fail. Not in the places the architect reinforced, but in the joints he considered beneath his attention. Robinson had managed 15 years of disappearances, forged documents, crossed state lines, shell companies, and bodies sealed in drums. He was undone, in part because he wouldn't return a woman's property. On June 2, 2000, 9 police vehicles rolled up on Robinson's property. At his home, investigators seized 5 computers, as well as several blank sheets of stationery signed by Lisa Stasi. In the storage unit, they found social security cards, driver's licenses, and other paperwork, including signed contracts, belonging to Suzette Truton and Isabella Lewicka. The contracts. The physical documents, signed by women whose families had been receiving cheerful emails assuring them everything was fine. On June 3, 2000, a search of Robinson's 16.5-acre farm near Lacine, Kansas, uncovered 2 55-gallon barrels submerged in a pond. The remains inside were later identified as those of Suzette Truton and Isabella Lewicka, both mummified and showing signs of death by blunt force trauma to the head. Kansas police contacted Missouri police and obtained a search warrant for a storage unit Robinson had rented in Raymore. Inside, they found 3 more barrels containing the decomposed remains of Sheila and Debbie Faith and Beverly Bonner. All 3 had suffered a blow to the head from a small, blunt object, most likely a hammer. 5 bodies, 5 barrels, a hammer, and a storage unit paid for in cash. The 5 computers seized from Robinson's home were, in 2000, an almost entirely new category of evidence. Digital forensics as a discipline barely existed. The investigators who analyzed those machines were operating at the frontier of a science that had not yet developed its vocabulary, let alone its standards. What they found was a crime scene as detailed as any physical location. Police subpoenaed America Online for the records of Robinson's internet name. They matched the IP addresses of emails sent to victims' families, claiming the women were traveling or happy to Robinson's home internet connection. In 2000, this was novel evidence. It dismantled his alibi that the women had left voluntarily. The hard drives also revealed the contracts, the forged letters, and the chat logs, a full grooming process, documented in real time. Think about what this meant. Robinson had spent 15 years exploiting the gap between systems that didn't talk to each other. Kansas police didn't know what Missouri police knew. Missouri police didn't know what Illinois police knew. Nobody had a complete picture. The letters he produced, the phone calls he staged, the signed stationery he collected. All of it worked because no single investigator had access to the full file. The internet changed that calculation. Because the internet leaves records, every login, every message, every IP address timestamp. The very tool Robinson had weaponized to find victims had also been quietly keeping a ledger of everything he did. The chat logs showed the grooming. The emails to families showed the deception. The IP records showed that the same connection, Robinson's connection in his house on his account, had sent messages claiming to be from women who were already dead and sealed in chemical drums on his property. He had thought the internet was a hunting ground. It turned out to also be a witness. Forensic experts reconstructed deleted files and internet history. Everything he had tried to erase was still there, in fragments, recoverable to technicians who knew what they were looking for. The slave contracts, the fake job offers, the correspondence with victims in the months before they vanished, the correspondence with their families in the months after. The investigations into Paula Godfrey and Lisa Stasi in the mid-'80s had failed due to jurisdictional fragmentation. Robinson had moved victims across state lines. Local police agencies did not share databases. When Robinson produced a signed letter from Godfrey, Overland Park Police closed the case, lacking the forensic tools or the cynicism to verify the signature. By 2000, the tools existed. The cynicism by then was also not in short supply. While investigators were cataloging barrels and subpoenaing AOL records, another thread was being pulled. When Robinson's home was searched, police found blank sheets of stationery signed by Lisa Stasi, the 19-year-old who had vanished in 1985 with her 4-month-old daughter. DNA analysis confirmed what the documents suggested. Tiffany Stasi, sold to Robinson's brother for $5,500 and raised as Heather Robinson, was the daughter of a murder victim. Her uncle had killed her mother. Her whole life had been constructed on the proceeds of that crime. When Robinson was arrested, Heather was 15 and learned for the first time that her real name was Tiffany Stasi. Consider the geometry of that revelation. A girl of 15, sitting in whatever room she was sitting in, being told that the family she had known was built on a lie. That the uncle she had known her whole life, the man she had eaten Christmas dinner with, the man whose wrongness she had always felt but never been able to name, had murdered her mother when her mother was 19 years old. That she herself had been sold. That her existence in this family had been purchased with forged documents and a fee paid to a lawyer who did not exist. The most extraordinary thread running through the Robinson case is the one that ended in that teenage girl's bedroom. Heather Robinson had felt something wrong about him. That quality of being watched, of something not quite right beneath the surface, and had never been able to articulate it. She had been right. She had always been right. She had spent 15 years in the orbit of her mother's killer, and her instincts had known it, and there had been no framework available to her to understand what she was sensing. After the longest criminal trial in Kansas history, Robinson stood trial in 2002. He was charged with 2 counts of capital murder for the killings of Isabella Luica and Suzette Trutin, as well as first-degree murder for Lisa Stasi, whose daughter he had sold. The charges emphasized Robinson's use of interstate luring tactics, with evidence showing he had transported victims across state lines. The prosecution built its case on 2 foundations: the physical evidence, the barrels, the bodies, the blunt force trauma, and the digital evidence, which was at that point unlike anything a Kansas courtroom had seen before. Chat logs, subpoenaed, ISP records, IP address matching, deleted files reconstructed from hard drives, the slave contracts bearing the signatures of dead women. Robinson's defense attempted to argue that the women had left voluntarily. The digital evidence dismantled that argument item by item. The emails to families had come from his connection. The letters had been typed on his equipment. The IP addresses placed him at the keyboard on dates when the women were already dead. The verdict: guilty, sentenced to death. In Missouri, he received life without parole for the 3 victims found there. Robinson remains on death row at El Dorado Correctional Facility in Kansas. Kansas has not executed a prisoner since 1965, which means Robinson has been waiting for a death sentence to be carried out in a state that has not carried one out in 6 decades. He has appealed repeatedly. He is now in his 80s. He has outlived several of the investigators who built the case against him. He sits in a cell and he waits. And in the meantime, the state of Kansas has not moved. Paula Godfrey's remains have never been found. Lisa Stasi's remains have never been found. Catherine Clampett's remains have never been found. Robinson has been asked repeatedly to reveal their locations. He has not. What Robinson understood before anyone else, before law enforcement, before the public, before the journalists who would eventually chronicle him, is that the internet was not a community. It was a window. On one side of the window were people looking for connection, looking for work, looking for escape, looking for something that their immediate physical world was not providing. On the other side of the window was John Edward Robinson, studying them. Robinson was not a monster who lived under a bridge. He was a monster who lived in the suburbs, served on community boards, and dialed into the internet just like millions of other Americans. He weaponized the mundane tools of modern life: the contract, the storage unit, the chat room. His longevity, 16 years, 8 confirmed victims, God knows how many might never be confirmed, was a product of systemic failure compounded by systemic advantage. He was white, male, well-dressed, articulate, and resident in a cultural moment that gave men who looked like him enormous benefit of the doubt. The investigators who saw Paula Godfrey's signed letter and closed the file were not incompetent. They were operating with the tools and assumptions of their time. So were the women who trusted him. But the failure was also infrastructural. Robinson survived for as long as he did because the systems that should have caught him were not built to share information, to trace paper trails across state lines, to question the authenticity of a typed letter with a plausible signature. He operated in the gaps, and the gaps were vast. The internet closed some of those gaps while opening others. The chat logs that convicted him were also the mechanism he used to groom his victims. The IP records that dismantled his alibi were also the connection through which he conducted 15 years of deception. The same tool, two edges, one pointing inward, one pointing out. The hunt for John Robinson was the first major victory of digital forensics, but it was also a warning. Although he is in prison, the hunting ground he helped pioneer is now open to the world. Every method Robinson used to lure, deceive, and cover his tracks has since been replicated, refined, and scaled by people who learned from his blueprint, consciously or not. The fake job offer, the assumed persona, the manufactured correspondence from the missing, the collected signatures on blank paper. He did not invent predation, but he did industrialize it for the digital age. And in doing so, he left behind not just 8 dead women and 1 living girl who had to rebuild everything she thought she knew about herself. He left behind a template. The template is still in use. That is perhaps the most important and least comfortable fact in this entire story. John Edward Robinson sits on death row in Kansas. The window he opened has never been closed. If you found this investigation compelling, please hit the like button and share it with your friends. Exposing these systemic cracks relies on viewers like you helping to push these stories forward. Make sure you are subscribed with notifications turned on so you never miss a breakdown. The archives are deep, and we are already opening the next file. Drop a comment below and tell us, what case should we examine next? Stay vigilant. Thank you for watching Constructing the Crime.